So it's this phenomenon we've all seen before, right? A decaying, scandal-ridden political party just sort of slaps on a fresh coat of paint.
Right, they buy some glossy social media ads, maybe roll out a brand new logo.
Exactly. And they declare to the world, we have changed. But what happens when you actually look past that shiny new billboard?
When you peer down into the rotting foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Down into the actual neighborhoods they govern. You look at their daily habits, the local power dynamics, how the local ward actually operates on a rainy Tuesday morning.
It's the reality versus the marketing.
Welcome to this deep dive, where we're going to look at the exact political equivalent of that January 1st New Year, New May phenomenon. We are jumping into a custom-tailored exploration just for you today.
And we're focusing on a really fascinating critique written by Deepak Raj Joshi.
Right. He's analyzing a major political entity, the Nepali Congress Party. But our mission today isn't just about one party in one country.
No, not at all.
We're using this text to dissect the universal mechanics of political rebranding. And that massive, sometimes comical but often tragic gulf that exists between a catchy political slogan and the ground-level reality of a legacy organization.
The specific focal point of Joshi's critique, it revolves around a recently popularized slogan from the party,
Right.
which translates directly to, Congress has changed, now we will change the country.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a massive, sweeping promise.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to me, a slogan like, Congress has changed, now we will change the country, it's the ultimate New Year's resolution.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds fantastic on a debate stage.
Yep.
It's incredibly catchy. But Joshi's text is essentially saying, all right, it's March. We saw your January 1st Instagram post. Now let's look at your daily habits.
Right. They have to prove it.
We're going to peel back the layers of this specific claim to see if anything genuinely shifted in the mechanics of the institution, or, if it's just a new coat of paint on a crumbling wall.
Now, to be clear to everyone listening, we don't have a horse in this race.
Definitely not.
We aren't endorsing this party, nor are we attacking them or elevating their rivals. We are strictly looking at Deepak Raj Joshi's text as a masterclass autopsy of how any political institution decays from the inside out.
Just analyzing the source material.
Exactly. We're looking at the immense structural friction that occurs when old guard traditions collide with modern voter demands. The text gives us a great framework to understand organizational psychology, the illusion of reform, and the mechanics of local power.
And what the author presents us with immediately is this stark transition from the soaring promise of that slogan to the immediate physical reality of how this supposed change is being presented to the public.
He uses an analogy that's really striking.
It is so visceral, it immediately frames the entire problem.
Yeah.
He says, imagine a person who goes out and buys a bright, shiny, brand new hat.
Right.
They put it on their head and it sparkles. It looks incredibly modern, but if you look down, their shirt is old, stained, and completely torn. Their pants are ragged and falling apart.
It's a jarring image.
Yeah, you cannot look at that person and say they are fully dressed, let alone fundamentally reformed or modernized. You've just put a shiny hat on top of decay.
And that shiny hat translates perfectly into modern institutional behavior. For this party, the author breaks down what that shiny hat actually represents in practice at the central leadership level.
What does that look like?
Well, it's the introduction of a few fresh faces at the very top of the hierarchy. It's the sudden, heavy use of modern vocabulary, incorporating tech-friendly buzzwords into central committee speeches.
I see.
And perhaps most notably, it's a massive, highly coordinated surge in digital and social media activity.
Right. It's the political equivalent of buying a Peloton, taking selfies on it every morning for Twitter, but still eating fast food for every single meal.
Exactly.
The digital footprint looks incredible. The graphics are high resolution. The lighting in the press conference is better. The sound bites are clipped perfectly for TikTok.
And it creates a highly convincing illusion of a modernized party. If you are only looking at the top, if you are a casual observer just scrolling through news feeds and seeing the hat, you might actually believe the slogan.
You'd think they really changed.
Right. You hear the new catchphrases, and it gives off the distinct impression that the foundational DNA of the party has transformed. But the author argues this is where the most dangerous psychological trap lies for the leadership itself.
Oh, this is fascinating.
The text uses a specific term to describe this, which is atmarati.
Let's ground that term for you guys listening. Atmarati translates to self-satisfaction or self-delusion. It's the political equivalent of breathing your own exhaust.
That's a good way to put it.
They're sitting in their shiny headquarters, scrolling their own feeds, looking at all the likes on their high-production videos, totally blind to the fact that the actual engine of the party is on fire.
Let's look at the mechanics of how that delusion actually forms. Why does central leadership fall into the trap of Bagmati? It happens because of the physical and structural isolation of political headquarters.
They're in a bubble.
A total bubble. The leaders are in the capital city, surrounded by a specialized digital team, communication directors, and political strategists whose entire job is to craft that shiny hat.
And everyone around them is cheering them on.
Exactly. The feedback loop they receive is entirely engineered. They send out a modern-sounding tweet, their inner circle praises it, the media writes a quick headline about the new messaging, and the leadership genuinely internalizes this as structural reform.
Hold on, isn't that incredibly dismissive of Joshi?
How do you mean?
Well, if you have a massive historic legacy institution, renovating the entire house in one day is physically impossible. Isn't painting the front door, getting the central messaging right, putting a few young faces on the central committee, updating the digital infrastructure, isn't that a necessary first step?
That's a fair question.
Why attack the hat? Isn't a shiny hat better than no hat at all when you're trying to signal change to the electorate?
It seems like a logical first step until you look at the psychological effect it has on the wearer. The author argues that reform confined to a small room at the central headquarters isn't a first step.
Okay, what is it then?
He says it is a terminal destination disguised as a first step. The delusion of Atmarati actually halts further progress. Because the leadership feels that profound sense of accomplishment from their new digital strategy, they lose the urgency to do the actual grueling work of structural reform.
They think the job's already done.
Exactly. They fall in love with their own reflection, completely ignoring the torn clothes, which in this critique represents the grassroots, the district, the regional, and the ward levels of the party.
The people actually doing the work on the ground.
Exactly. The author is explicitly pointing out that while the central headquarters is tweeting about modernization and using progressive buzzwords, down in the wards, in the actual villages and municipalities where voters interact with the party, the old entrenched mentalities remain completely untouched.
So the foundation is still rotting.
Yes. The daily habits haven't changed a bit. The ordinary grassroots workers are not feeling any sense of justice, respect, or new opportunity. So the change is entirely hollow.
It's just a facade.
A facade that provides central leadership with an excuse to avoid the messy, complicated realities of their decaying local infrastructure.
Okay, so if the grassroots level is the torn clothing, we really need to understand the mechanics of why it's torn. Clothes don't just decay on their own, right? There is a mechanism of wear and tear.
That's right.
What is actively tearing the fabric of the party at the local level?
Well, the lower levels, the wards, the municipalities, the districts, they are the nervous system of any political party.
Makes sense.
A central committee can draft the most brilliant, modern, utopian manifesto in the world, but it is the local level that is tasked with actually implementing it, communicating it to the voters, and living it out in the community.
They're the ones knocking on doors.
Yes, and according to the text, this vital nervous system is plagued by a specific operational model. The author says they function as syndicates.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Joshi doesn't describe these local party organizations as democratic platforms, or debate halls, or community social institutions.
No, he uses a much harsher term.
He explicitly says they're operating like the private companies of a few limited individuals. That is a massive paradigm shift. When a political ward operates like a private company, the motive changes entirely from public service to profit and monopoly.
The text refers to this phenomenon as Gutbandi, which means factionalism or the creation of intense, closed-off cliques. But we need to explore how Gutbandi actually operates on the ground.
How does it work in practice?
It is the systematic capture of local power. A single group, a syndicate, grabs hold of the leadership at the district or ward level, and they don't let go for years, sometimes decades.
Let's give the listener a tangible scenario to picture what Gutbandi really looks like, because it's not just people politely disagreeing in a meeting room.
Far from it.
Imagine you're a local party worker. You spent 10, maybe 15 years knocking on doors in the rain, organizing local rallies, defending the party line to your neighbors, doing the unglamorous grunt work of politics.
The real heavy lifting.
Right. A local election finally comes up. You are the obvious, meritorious choice for the ward chairmanship. But the leader of the local syndicate has a nephew who just graduated from college and wants to get into politics.
Or maybe they have a wealthy local businessman who promises to fund the syndicate's activities.
Exactly. The syndicate bypasses you, the loyal worker, and hands the candidacy to the nephew or the donor. That is good bandy in action.
And it goes deeper than just ticket distribution. Once that syndicate has monopoly control, they treat the entire local party apparatus as their private enterprise.
So they hoard everything.
They do. They exclusively distribute opportunities, committee placements, and local resources to their own inner circle. If you are outside the clique, you are starved of resources.
Wow.
Furthermore, the mechanics of good bandi require the systematic crushing of dissent. If you, the sidelined worker, try to raise a grievance or suggest a different strategy, you are not viewed as a passionate colleague offering a healthy debate.
How are you viewed?
You are viewed as a direct threat to the private company's bottom line.
You become a liability.
You become a liability, and so those voices are actively and intentionally pushed out. The syndicate consolidates its power by ensuring only yes men remain in the room.
So they just build an echo chamber at the local level, too.
Precisely. The author refers to this factionalism as a disease that has not been cured by any of the shiny new hats at the central level.
Think about the immense human cost of that environment. The author spends significant time exploring the emotional and structural toll this takes on the people who actually built the party's foundation.
It's devastating for them.
The highly capable, honest, and loyal workers, the people who actually believe in the party's ideological manifesto, they're the ones who get marginalized first, because principled people generally make terrible yes men.
The tragedy highlighted in the source material is what happens next. These dedicated individuals become deeply frustrated.
What do?
The text notes that they either completely abandon their political engagement, simply sitting at home, withdrawing their energy and intellect from the public sphere, or they are forced to seek alternative paths.
Like leaving the party entirely.
Yes, sometimes even leaving for rival organizations just to find a platform where their merit is actually recognized.
It's the ultimate brain drain. You are actively filtering out your most principled, hardest working people and keeping only the opportunists.
And if those older, loyal workers, the veterans who have the institutional memory and the local respect, if they are sitting at home frustrated, it creates a massive vacuum.
Which brings up the next logical step in the collapse. If the veterans are giving up and leaving, who is the party trying to recruit to replace them? The youth. But there's a massive roadblock there too.
The historical resume is undeniably incredible. They are the architects of the nation's democratic history.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the author's sharpest, most ruthless critique lands right here. The interest of history cannot run the politics of the future. The legacy is a fact, but it is not a strategic roadmap for governing tomorrow.
Hold on, isn't that incredibly ungrateful of Gen Z? I mean, we're talking about founders who literally went to prison, who faced exile, who risked their lives and shed blood to secure the basic right to vote.
It's a massive sacrifice.
And now the youth are tossing them out because the local government app doesn't load fast enough, or because they don't use the right slang. Doesn't a republic owe a debt of gratitude to the people who fought for its very existence?
It is a profound philosophical tension, and you hear that exact argument from old guard politicians across the globe. But Joshi uses the text to cut through the emotion with pure political pragmatism.
So what's his counter-argument?
The argument isn't that the historical role of the party should be erased or forgotten. The text explicitly acknowledges that this role is unforgettable. But the psychological mechanism at play here is a clash of two entirely different political currencies.
Two different currencies, okay.
The older generation operates on the currency of tiag, which translates to sacrifice.
Tiag, sacrifice.
Yes. For the old guard, their entire political identity, their moral authority, and their justification for holding power is based on what they gave up in the past.
The struggles they went through.
The prison sentences, the underground movements, the physical trauma they endured. They view the voting booth as an arena of gratitude. But the youth, Gen Z, and millennials operate on a completely different currency.
What's their currency?
The text defines their currency as delivery.
And let's explain why there's such a disconnect. It's not just that young people are inherently ungrateful. It's that fighting a physical underground revolution requires a completely different skill set than running a modern civic administration.
That's a crucial distinction.
The older generation spent their formative years learning how to survive, how to mobilize protests, and how to dismantle oppressive regimes. They didn't spend their 20s learning about urban zoning laws, digital infrastructure, or modern economic policy.
That is the crux of the mechanism. The youth have grown up taking the republic for granted. For them, democracy isn't a hard-won prize. It is the baseline expectation.
It's just the starting line.
Exactly. They don't want to gather in a sweaty room just to hear a 70-year-old politician recite epic poetry about a revolution that happened before they were born. As the text points out, they are highly pragmatic.
What are they asking for, specifically?
They want good governance, they want tangible employment opportunities, they want tech-friendly public services that actually work, and above all, they want a society free from the petty corruption that forces them to pay a bribe just to get a basic permit.
Gratitude doesn't win the ballot box. They are treating the election not as a thank you card for past services rendered, but as a hiring mechanism for future management.
That's the perfect way to phrase it.
If I'm hiring a manager for my tech company, I don't care how brave they were 30 years ago. I care if they know how to code today. The author notes a very tangible, immediate consequence of this disinterest. In the recent elections, these younger generations actively abstained from voting for the Legacy Party.
They just stayed home or looked elsewhere.
They just walked away.
Because if a legacy party keeps trying to pay for today's votes with yesterday's sacrifices, they will inevitably face political insolvency. And as you mentioned earlier, nature abhors a vacuum.
It certainly does.
If the legacy party is stagnating locally because of syndicates and hemorrhaging the youth vote because they refuse to speak the language of delivery, that massive void in the political marketplace will be filled.
So who walks through the door when the Legacy Party leaves the house empty?
Populists. The author introduces this as the new existential battlefield. The Legacy Party is no longer just fighting its traditional historical rivals who operate by the same old rules.
The game has changed.
The landscape has fundamentally shifted. They are competing against emerging new forces who are entirely unburdened by history.
Let's look at how populists weaponize this exact dynamic. A populist doesn't have a 50-year legacy to defend. They don't have to talk about the 2007 BS revolution.
They don't even mention it.
They just have to pull out their smartphone, record a TikTok pointing at a giant pothole in the middle of a ward controlled by the Legacy Party and say, they've been in power for 30 years and you still break your suspension driving to work.
It's devastatingly effective.
It is immediate, it is highly visual, and it speaks directly to that demand for delivery.
The author defines this as the new standard of public judgment. Voters are now hyper-focused on conduct and work style. They're entirely desensitized to grand speeches.
They've tuned them out.
They've heard the speeches for decades, and they've realized the words don't fix the potholes. Now, public perception is being shaped by immediate, observable actions.
Like what?
The text notes that everything from a local ward member asking for a small bribe to massive, high-profile scandals at the central level is what actually imprints on the public mind.
So actions really are speaking louder than words.
Yes. The shiny hat of central messaging cannot compete with the visceral reality of local corruption captured on a smartphone.
So how does an institution like this survive? Because Joshi doesn't just write an autopsy report here. He writes a prescription. The text lays out strict demands for reform if this party or any legacy institution wants to survive the wave of populism and youth disillusionment.
The prescriptions are drastic because the disease is advanced.
What's the first step?
The first step the author demands is honest self-reflection. And this directly counters the atmarati, the self-delusion we discussed earlier.
Popping the bubble.
Genuine self-reflection means the leadership must step out of their echo chamber and openly, publicly accept their flaws. They cannot try to hide their failures behind new logos or shift the blame to their rivals. They have to publicly own the decay of their own foundation.
Which is the hardest thing for a politician to do, honestly. It goes against every instinct they have to stand up and say, we became corrupt, we became lazy, and we failed you.
It requires immense courage.
But the second prescription is even more structural. It hits on the youth aspect. Joshi says that youth integration has to change completely. Think about how legacy parties have traditionally used young people.
How so?
They use the youth wing to mobilize rallies, to act as the physical muscle during strikes, and to be the loud megaphone shouting slogans on the streets.
Right. They treat the youth as raw energy to be directed by the old guard, not as intellect to be utilized.
Exactly. The text demands an absolute end to this dynamic. The youth must be integrated into actual policy making. They need to be given the pen to write the manifesto, not just the banner to hold outside the
They
building.
need real agency.
They need to be in the decision-making rooms where the resources are allocated.
That ties directly into the third and perhaps most fundamental philosophical shift required by the author.
Who's that?
It's a conceptual redefinition of what politics is supposed to be. The text demands that politics must be aggressively moved away from being a means of personal gain or business. It must be elevated back to a medium of pure service.
Moving from personal business to pure service. That brings us right back to the good bandy, the syndicates we talked about earlier.
It's the core issue.
When a local clique treats the ward office like their own private LLC, distributing contracts to their friends and starving out their rivals, that is the literal definition of politics as a business.
And when political access is monetized in that way, the trust of the people vanishes entirely. The author is arguing that this trust cannot be repaired with a new slogan.
A slogan won't cut it.
It can only be reestablished when the business model of the syndicate is dismantled and replaced with an ethos where the primary objective is community welfare.
Which brings up a sentiment from the text that perfectly summarizes this entire dynamic of the central facade versus local reality. Joshi essentially says that a beautiful, progressive manifesto drafted at the central headquarters is entirely meaningless if the local representatives are corrupt and opaque.
It's a powerful point.
Those who claim they will change the country, echoing that massive New Year's resolution slogan we started with, must first have the courage and the capability to change the face of their own ward and municipality.
It is the ultimate, undeniable litmus test for political rhetoric. You cannot claim the capacity to reform an entire nation if you cannot or will not reform the corrupt, nepotistic syndicate operating in your own local neighborhood.
You had to clean your own house first.
The macro reform is entirely dependent on the micro execution. If the local ward remains torn, the country remains unchanged.
So what does this all mean for you listening at home? We started with a slogan, Congress has changed, now we will change the country. And through the lens of Deepak Raj Joshi's critique, we've explored the massive gears and pulleys working behind the scenes.
And what we found is pretty stark.
For a slogan like that to be anything more than a hollow, catchy advertisement, the organization cannot just change its clothes. It cannot just put on a shiny new hat of digital media and central-level buzzwords while breathing its own exhaust.
No, it has to dig deeper.
It has to fundamentally change its thought and its behavior. It has to go down into the dirt of the grassroots and forcibly tear down the walls of factionalism and syndicates.
It needs structural reform.
It has to establish true, breathing internal democracy where that loyal, honest, 10-year door knocker isn't sidelined by a wealthy donor or a well-connected nephew.
Valuing merit over nepotism.
Exactly. It must transition from demanding reverence for its past sacrifices to actually delivering on the complex, pragmatic needs of the future. Only by doing that, according to the text, will they generate the moral force required to actually lead a country toward prosperity.
And as we wrap up this analysis, it is worth reiterating that the value of this text extends far beyond the borders of Nepalese politics. We've used this specific critique to map out the universal anatomy of organizational decay.
It applies everywhere.
The friction between legacy and youth, the danger of central delusion, and the toxicity of local syndicates are mechanisms that plague corporations, nonprofits, and political entities across the globe.
Which brings me back to our opening thought. Think about the institutions, the companies, the local school boards, or even the social groups in your own life right now. Are any of them currently putting on a shiny new hat while actively ignoring a decaying, torn foundation underneath?
It's a great question to reflect on.
And if you find yourself inside an organization like that, how can it authentically pivot from demanding respect for its glorious past to actually proving its worth for the future? Something for you to think about the next time you see a billboard promising that everything has changed.